Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm the video marketing specialist here at eLearning Brothers. Today our session will be talking about how to take inspiration from live action role play for e-learning. It's going to be an interesting topic for sure. This session will be recorded. We'll get a copy of it sent out to all who have registered to watch this, so you can watch that at your leisure. We will also post a copy of it on our blog later in the week. If you have questions or comments during the webinar, do use that questions panel. There'll be a couple times where we ask for your participation as well, so it'll be good for you to find that and know where that's at ahead of time. All right, so to talk to us about our amazing topic today, we have Josh Bleggi, our learning designer, with us today. He's been working with our customizable courseware team and helping to design some of our amazing learning that you guys should all check out for sure. But without further ado, and without me talking anymore, I'll turn it over to you, Josh.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate everybody being here today. This should be a fun topic. Something that I'm very passionate about, something that's very personal to me. So I hope you all enjoy this. But to get started here, I just want to get to know, who we have here in the audience with us right now. So I just want to take a quick poll here of what is your role in e-learning / training. Are you an instructional design wizard? Are you a loyal knight of development? Are you the overlord of the LMS? Are you a jack of all trades, meaning you do just a little bit of everything? Or something other? Or you're extremely confused by all these responses? So please just take a second there on the screen to click and respond.
It's very telling what's here in our audience. This is very, very good. We'll give you guys a couple more seconds to comment or respond to this poll. Responses still coming in. I think people are trying to translate them into what their actual job titles are. All right, we'll close this out in 3, 2, 1, and here's those results. So 56% of our audience are the jack of all trades. That's a pretty common thing that we find.
Yeah.
You guys are stuck with all of the jobs. We also have 29% of the audience instructional design wizards, and then we've got a couple knights of development, overlords of the LMS, and only a couple people that are confused.
Well, that's great. I was hoping nobody would get too confused by that. But great. Yeah, that's good to know that we have in our audience. And yeah, I understand that a lot of people within our industry are very much the jack of all trades type, where you have some of the responsibilities over instructional design, some of it over development, where you're dealing with the LMS and things like that. So it's great to have you all here today. Hopefully we'll be able to take something away from this and find some inspiration from what I'm going to talk about today. So just really quickly, what we're going to go over today is I'm going to give you a brief introduction into the world of LARPing for those of you that might not be familiar with it. And then I'm going to go through 5 stories and lessons learned from my experience in the world of live action role play. So to kind of get into it right now, I just want to see where people are at on their understanding of what a LARP or a live action role play is. And so again, here there's a poll on your screen, and your responses are there. It says, "Is that really a word? I've heard of it before, but never tried it. I've tried it. I LARP every chance that I get," and other. What other responses you might have there. So go ahead and take a second to respond to that.
Got a cousin that does LARPing. I've got an uncle that does LARPing. Is that what you can put in?
Yeah, that's what you can put in other, yeah.
D&D back in the day?
D&D, yeah.
For sure?
Yeah, that's absolutely.
All right, we'll close this out in 3, 2, 1, and here's those results. So 44% of our audience have heard of it before, but they haven't tried it. 22% of our audience have tried it. 22% are confused what LARPing is. 4% LARP every chance they get.
Nice.
So that's great. We've got a lot of people that are familiar with it. And then the comments that have come in the questions panel are pretty much tabletop LARPing, so to speak.
Tabletop LARPing, yeah. That's most people's introduction is like a tabletop LARP, like a Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, those type of things, because those are very similar to LARPing, but there's a big difference that we'll explain here in a second. So to define what LARPing is, so I went out on the internet and tried to find a good definition that kind of encompassed what LARPing is and what it is to me. And so I was able to find something from a YouTuber called the LARP House to kind of explain the definition that was simple to understand for everyone. And this was what she had to say. And if you go out and Google, this is actually the definition that you find. So a LARP is a type of interactive role-playing game in which the participants portray characters through physical action, often in costume and with props. So like a Dungeons and Dragons, which is a tabletop role-playing game, you're sitting around a table telling a story together, reacting with dice and other things to move the story along. With LARPing, you're the one actually moving the story along. You're the one that's going out there, performing the action, whatever that might be, whether that's just, combat or negotiations with people. You're the one moving that story along. To further kind of understand what a LARP is, we need to understand that there's a spectrum for LARPing from different varying degrees of, I don't know if you want to say intensity or like involvement, things that I guess your like commitment to it and whatnot. So there's kind of your more hardcore LARPing people, which are like the SCA, which are considered a practical LARP because they wear a bunch of armor, they hit each other with very stiff weapons, which is why they wear the armor, so they prevent injury that way. And they're more focused on reenactments of like medieval battles and things like that. They're very historically focused, which is why they're kind of considered a more practical, I call them more of a hardcore LARP group. Then you got the ones that are more focused on fantasy, or what are considered boffer LARPs. A boffer is like a foam weapon, and you see them most commonly either made out of they can be made out of either like something as simple as like a pipe insulation and PVC pipe as a core, to what these guys are using in these pictures, which are actually weapons made out of latex that are foam padded, and they vary in degree on how much combat they have involved. And whether they have a magic system or not, so whether they are actually more fantasy-based versus historically based. Then you get down to the end where more people are familiar with, more people are comfortable with, and maybe some people don't even think of this as LARPing because it is becoming so common. And that's something like an escape room or like a haunted house, or maybe even you could say laser tag, those type of things, where you're still doing an interactive activity where you're trying to pursue a goal of some sort, and you're interacting with other people to achieve that goal. That's still a LARP. And so to kind of sum up what LARPing is, especially for me, what it is it's a chance for collaborative storytelling with a bunch of other people. It's a creative outlet. It also provides some stress relief because you're out in the outdoors, you're doing some physical activities and things like that. And it's also a chance to build relationships with other people and learn leadership skills and things like that. So like LARPing is something different to everybody, but it has some very key things that represent it. So now that I've kind of explained what a LARP is, I'm kind of curious to see, because we had some responses about this on social media as we were talking about this LARP, or this activity in LARPing and things like that, where people made some comments about different things, different relationships they saw between e-learning and LARPing. So I'm just kind of curious what you all in the audience see as how might LARPing relate to designing good e-learning. And so we'll open up that chat, that comments panel, and Andrew, just want to take a second and shout some of those out for me. We'll kind of see what you guys see already.
So one person here says, we're planning to do something similar with firefighters using simulated fire incidents. And I think that's a great example.
Really cool. Yeah, that's a great example.
You play a role to solve a problem in e-learning. A lot of the time you may, in fact, our custom team showed an example here where they were a event manager, and they went and trained at a casino to be an event manager. So that was role play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Escape room, using that for e-learning. I guess you could make that a learning kind of thing. A good learning is based on developing the learner. Role-playing games often have that element of developing the character, upping the stats, etc. That's a great thought.
Good example.
Give participants opportunity to pose real-life scenarios. That's good. Here's a question: does this play into AR?
You could play it into AR. I've never thought about that before, but yes, like you could set up a scenario where the person is interacting with their environment, trying to move a story along, with the use of AR, virtual reality as well.
This is another comment. You can understand what your users are experiencing if you wanted to role play as your user. That's very true.
That's a good point.
By making it fun and simulated, you can reduce stress, allow the brain to learn, and make it sticky if you can make it a positive experience. Hands-on learning and application is always a great development link. Absolutely. There's a question here. Are those Netflix specials where you choose your own adventure considered LARPing? I don't know if I would consider those LARPing because you're not taking a hugely active...
The point is that it's a physical action where you're choosing that, we're making those options, those choose your own adventure type things. That I would liken more into like a D&D, tabletop RPG. So it's still role playing. It's just not the live action where you're actually going out and performing the action yourself.
Which is the law in LARP.
Right.
Okay. One other tie together here. Would you consider any gamification LARPing?
You could. I mean, if you set up a real-world scenario for the person to go through, and you provide the opportunity, and we'll talk about this here more in a second, but you provide the opportunity for them to practice and go through the story, you give them a story to kind of go through, it has a lot of LARPing elements to it that you could set up. And like even if you took it outside of e-learning and went into the real world as just a learning experience design, right? You could put them in different scenarios within like an office or whatnot that they're learning different things by interacting and trying to figure out a solution to a problem that way.
Great.
So great. Thanks, guys. Those are great answers. A lot of smart people out there. So next I want to introduce you to my world in LARPing, so I'm part of a LARP called AmpGuard. And AmpGuard started in about the mid-'80s down in Texas, so if any Texans are out there, be proud of where this has come from. But now it's stretched like all across the world, so this is a kind of an international organization. We're considered a boffer LARP, which means we use foam-padded weapons. As you can kind of see in some of these pictures here, they look a little bit like lightsabers. Most of them are made out of either pipe insulation or even like blue camp foam pad. So we kind of like to make our own weapons, make our own clothing and things like that. And we're kind of a diverse group because we're not just purely focused on combat. That's one of our main things. That's the main reason why people come, is because we have these fun battle games like you see pictured down there on the bottom middle picture. But we also encourage crafting, so making your own items, clothing, things like that, and leadership. So we have different like leadership roles that you can take on within the organization to help other players out, to help the park that you're part of move forward, things like that. So we kind of have a big diversity versus just being purely about smacking each other with foam weapons. We're also a swords and sorcery based organization, which means that not only do we have people that act as maybe like a warrior or a knight, but we have other what are called classes involved that can use spells and things like that as part of their character. And so like within the organization, you're encouraged to take on a persona, like someone mentioned, developing and leveling up as an example. Within AmpGuard, there is a system to where you develop your character. They take on like I mentioned earlier, a class, which is some sort of like role within the team, and then they're able to develop that character in that class and level up as they continue to come into different activities and perform different things and things like that. So there's a lot of good things about this organization that I just have grown to love so much. But I kind of want to take you guys now on a journey, and I'm going to use my journey within AmpGuard to teach a few lessons that I've learned and been able to take into my practical, what we call mundane life, and into my job as an e-learning experience designer here. And this is just purely like how it's affected my process and my procedures that I follow. And so we're going to stop here on our first stop and talk about my first day at AmpGuard. I was really actually super happy when I found these photos on our group's Facebook page, because that's actually my first day at AmpGuard. If you see me there, kind of in the green hoodie, kind of small there, but that's me. This is my first day. And so when I show up the first day, I knew very little about AmpGuard. I'd read some of the stuff on their website. I joined their Facebook group and posted a comment saying, hey, I'm coming this weekend, and people had told me a few things before. But I really didn't know what was going on. And so I show up to this park and walk up to this group, and they're very inviting, very friendly, and they start explaining things to me.
And they recognized that you were there because you brought swords with you.
I didn't bring a sword with me this time.
Oh, you just wandered up to them?
I just wandered up to them.
Oh, that is very inviting.
Yeah, so they were very inviting to me. They took the opportunity to explain to me very basically what the rules were, how the combat system worked, and some of like safety rules and things like that. And then they pretty much handed me a sword and said, "Go have fun." That's about the only introduction I had. They sort of went into what classes were and how different things functioned, and how these different games would work, and they explained to me the rules of each of the games that we were playing that day. But really, they just gave me the most simplest instructions that I needed to perform the task at hand, which was just to get out there and get involved. So what this now teaches me then, as an e-learning designer, is that when we're designing good learning, we need to focus on one desired behavior at a time. We need to make sure that whatever we're explaining is simple and gives the learner what they need at that time to help them develop that particular skill. And then as that learner progresses, we give them more information so that they can perform different other tasks and be better at what they're doing. Just like for me, coming in like this first day, it was very overwhelming in some ways, but they did tell me, they're just like, it's okay you feel overwhelmed. We're going to give you what you need to succeed right now. We're going to continue to do that, ask us questions, keep going, just get involved and get doing the thing. And so they gamified the learning for me as I was, as they were giving me the formal instruction. They then gamified everything and said, okay, just get involved, perform the action that we need you to do, keep doing this, And because of that gamification of this, I was more engaged, and even though it was overwhelming at first, it made me want to come back, which is what we want our learners to do, is to continue to develop these skills and continue to do what we want them to do as they progress, versus just giving them all the information up front and saying, here, go do the thing, because that's not going to help them. We need to keep it simple and give them one desired behavior at a time. Before I move on to the next phase, anything?
No other questions at this time. Just a lot of compliments about the art in this.
It is
session.
fantastic. You can thank Stacy, who's one of our graphic designers here, for her hard work on this. She did a great job with these. So now let's move on to our next stop along the path here. So as I got involved with this organization, there was obviously a lot of stuff, like I mentioned, that I needed to learn, because I couldn't just learn it all that first day, because it would just been too overwhelming. And so along with our weekly park Saturdays, where we go out and have these fun games like you see pictured here, or tournament battles like you see pictured in the with the man with the red shield there, we also have what's called a fighter practice each week, which is where we get together and just practice our skills in fighting. And when I first started going, it was the middle of November in Utah, which, if you haven't experienced that, it's generally pretty cold. And so since we were meeting at night versus during the daytime, I would show up to somebody's house and we'd go fight out in his garage. And he would kind of critique my skill, what I was doing, and tell me, okay, here's what I want you to do, and give me some tips and some practice techniques and things like that. He would then have me practice while he evaluated what I was doing to give me better advice to continue to improve. And then when it came to Saturday, I was again able to go out there, practice, and continue to practice what I was doing based off of what I had learned previously. So what this now teaches me as an e-learning designer is this idea of learning a skill, rehearsing it, and then going out and performing that skill. So basically start with some sort of formalized learning, whether that's like an ILT instructional or e-learning course. You give them that information so that they know what they need to do. You then send them out into the world to build that skill in a safe environment. So whether that's through a simulation on an e-learning course, or whether that's some simple like go ask your coworker or your boss these questions, you give them the chance to practice that skill, so that way they feel comfortable doing that action, and then you send them out to actually perform that in the workplace, to where they can continually do that and master that skill. Something else that helps with this idea of learning, rehearsing, and performing is providing a mentor for that individual, someone that they can go to that is not there to judge, but to help lift and elevate their skill, to evaluate what they're doing and say, okay, this is what you could do better, but this is what you're also doing well. Someone that can mentor them and help them develop their skills, so that way they're able to master that and continue to progress along their journey into whatever organization they are in. So we ready for the next stop? Okay. So now we're going to go over to this castle here. So this one's going to be, I'm going to kind of flop my model that I've been using here for a second and tell you kind of the principle that I'm teaching here before I tell you the story. So what I want you to get across is that if you tell your learner a compelling story, set them up with some sort of what's in it for me, they're going to have a better experience with your learning. And so for me, so like I said, each Saturday we get together and we have different games that we play. And a lot of times before we get together for these games, there's an explanation of like rules, there's usually some little story set up for us, and then we divide up into teams. And some of these can get from simple as just we need you to move this object from this point to this other point, but sometimes they can get a little bit more complicated. In this game that you see pictured here, so this is all from the same day, and I'll explain the rabbit ears here in a second. But what happened here was this was the day before Easter, so this is the Saturday before Easter, where we got together, and the battle game that was set up for us to play that day was pretty unique, because most games that we would play, we would typically have two teams that pretty much had the same objective. They were just trying to beat the other one to it, and they had pretty much the same motivations and things like that. Well, in this particular game, we had three teams, and each of them had a different motivation, different objective they were trying to achieve. And so what was set up for us as the objective was that there were these Easter eggs, these little plastic Easter eggs, that were set up in these gardens. And these Easter eggs had special healing qualities that we all wanted, but we wanted them for different reasons. So we had one team that was a team of like a village militia, basically, that was coming out to get the eggs to help heal the sick in their village. We had another group that was there as trying to collect the eggs so that they could sell them to the highest bidder, so they're kind of a bandit horde, basically. And then you had the lowly rabbit folk, which was the team that I was on, which is why I have the bunny ears on in these pictures. And we were just trying to keep the eggs in the gardens because we lived underground, and the magic from the Easter eggs was helping to keep our village alive. And so we were wanting to keep the eggs there as much as possible. So we were kind of going out there just kind of being a nuisance to both teams, trying to keep them away and keep them from grabbing our eggs. And so we all had a very compelling motivation for performing the action that was wanted at that time. And eventually, the way the story goes, just to kind of give you how it wrapped up, we ended up, as the underfolk, made a treaty with one of the groups that was trying to get the eggs for their village, and we were able to find kind of a compromise where we both kind of won that situation. But when you bring in a story to an action that you're trying to teach, so to any sort of learning that you're trying to teach, it sets up this concept of what's in it for me. Why am I doing this? And it gives the learner a very compelling reason to do that. And that's what we want to do, is we want to give everyone a compelling reason for why they're doing your training. Because we've all sat in those like trainings, whether that was in school or whether that was professionally, where it was just death by PowerPoint. We're just sitting there watching a PowerPoint slide go by. We're supposed to be taking notes, but let's be honest, no one did. And we don't really get much out of that at the end of the day. But if we give somebody this reason for being there, this what's in it for me, they're going to retain more things. And some key elements to this, to setting up a good what's in it for me, is always make the learner the hero of the story. like make sure that they understand the desired action that they're performing by going through this training is going to benefit them and is going to make them the hero for your organization. Because of them being better trained, better things will happen within their organization. Like they need to understand that there is value to performing this action, and then as well making sure at the end of it that you're delivering on whatever promise you give them at the beginning of your story, so that way they feel fulfilled when they get to the end of the training or activity that you're trying to have them do. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next one now. So we're going to take a little stop at this inn up here, and our beard's going to grow a little bit, and we're going to get a little bit more professional, let's just say here.
It's all about that beard.
It's all about the beard. Definitely is. So like I've mentioned before, we meet each Saturday as a group locally to have games and to get together and spend time with one another. But occasionally, particularly between like the spring and fall seasons, we have bigger events that we're able to go to that have people that are part of our Amp Guard organization, but they're from all across either the country, the region that we're in, or even from the world. And we're able to get together and have bigger events, bigger battle games, bigger tournaments, things like that. That are really a fun time to get together and get to know other really nerdy people that love the same thing that you do. But these events, they take a lot of planning. Whether that's the individual groups coming to the event that have to set up campsites and food and make sure everybody has tents. And in this case, so this event, it doesn't show it in this pictures, but this weekend it rained like crazy on us. And so you got to make sure that you're able to keep everybody dry, things like that. So there's a lot of planning that goes into from an individual group coming to the event, but also for the people planning the event, there's a lot of planning that needed to happen in advance. And so they spent months planning this activity, this event. And they did a pretty good job overall, but there were a few downfalls that they ran into. And that was mainly, number one, the weather did not cooperate with us. Like I mentioned, it was stormy and rainy when we first got there, which then set up the schedule that they had planned. Didn't quite work out because the weather didn't cooperate. And so they had to adjust that schedule, but they didn't really do the best job of organizing that. They didn't have the people in place that they needed to make sure everything went off without a hitch. And so it kind of put a damper on certain aspects of the event, despite it being a very good event to come there. I mean, there were some issues with balancing in games. There's some issues with not having enough referees to make sure everybody was safe. I mean, there's a ton of little issues that popped up just because the planning was not exactly where it needed to be because of us given the certain situation. And so the lesson that we can learn here is that poor preparation will equal poor execution on our part. And so whenever we're starting to develop a new project, we need to look at where we want to be at the end of the project, know where our ending is from the beginning, and so that way we have a goal that we're setting and moving towards, and we're able to, that we're willing to achieve. We also need to trust that we have other people on our team that know what they're doing, and that will be there, and that we don't need to micromanage them as they're trying to perform a certain task. So like, for instance, at this event, like I mentioned, they had issues getting certain people that were key to getting the event to run to the place where they needed to be. We didn't have enough referees to man certain games, so they were kind of postponed or canceled due to just poor staffing. So just make sure that you have the right people in place to know what they need to do. And as well, along with having the right people, making sure that they have the right support and training that they need to succeed. So in our case, that might be, they need to learn a certain tool, or they need to have, certain files that they need to put into the training, things like that. In the case of the event that I attended, making sure that people had, were properly hydrated, were properly given the right equipment, things like that. Making sure that everyone was set up for success, because the way I like to look at it is anything can work with support, and the moment that you stop getting people support, things start to crumble and fail. And so we need to make sure that we have that structure set up within our organization to where we have a strong team that we can all succeed together. And then another very key thing to this is, even though you're making all the preparations and plans that you can possibly do, be willing to adjust on the fly. Make sure that whatever you're doing is not so rigid that you can't make some sort of concession, because as most of us probably know, if not all of us, something always comes up, whether that's a stakeholder that wants something done differently, whether that's a budget constraint that we didn't know about maybe at the beginning, or maybe something cost more than we thought it would. There's always going to be something where we need to adjust, and being willing to be flexible and agile in that will make us better prepared for when those, roadblocks pop up for us as we move forward. Okay, before I move to our last stop there at the last castle, is there any questions, Andrew?
There are no questions at this time.
Great. So lastly on our journey here, so now our wizard's going to get a hat, he's going to have a fireball, like he's pretty well evolved at this point. What I want to talk to you about is continuing success and how we achieve that. And so, like I mentioned earlier, within AmpGuard, there are certain classes or roles people can play. And a lot of those classes are fairly straightforward in what they're doing. Whether that's, a warrior that's meant to go out there and just cause trouble for the other team by whacking them with the sword and whatnot. But some of them get a little more complicated. And those are more of our spellcaster classes, because we have a lot more flexibility in what we're able to do, and the different spells and things that we're allowed to use. And so for me, I actually do a spellcaster class called a Druid, and each spellcaster class has certain things that they do well and that people expect them to do out on the battlefield. And I started noticing, for me, although I love the class that I play, there were certain things that I didn't like to do that were the things that other people expected me to do. And there's things I thought I could maybe change and do better for the way that I played. And sometimes that gets people a little bit frustrated with you because you're trying to do something different. But the point is, I've had to learn to be okay with that and just play the game the way that I want to play it, and not let other people's opinion affect me and how my character works and how I'm developing that character along the way, because I'm trying to learn by experimentation and continuing to do that. And I just need to be comfortable with what I'm doing and who I am and what my character is supposed to be doing. So for us as e-learning designers, the important thing is that we need to be the hero of our own story, and we need to be brave in what we're doing. Everyone does their job a little bit differently, and that doesn't mean that anybody's doing it wrong. Everybody's trying to learn and to progress and move along their path in their career, and sometimes we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to do things that people don't expect, sometimes maybe things that people don't want us to do or don't like, but we need to be able to be willing to try new things as we move along. And remember that sometimes the craziest ideas turn out for the best. To give you kind of an example of this, so like Andrew mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, I work on our customizable courseware product, which is our pre-built trainings off the shelf that we sell. When we were developing some of those courses, like previously I mentioned about setting up a good, compelling story, one of the ways that we did that is we set up a scenario with a stick figure called Sean Stickmin, who gets himself into all kinds of mischief. And then the learner has to decide, okay, was Sean doing the right thing or was he doing the wrong thing? I will give you a hint, most of the time he's not doing the right thing. But we set up these different scenarios and things for him in several different courses. We ended up using it quite a bit. But when I first thought of that idea, I was a little bit concerned because it was within a couple months of starting to work here, and I didn't know how well necessarily that idea would come across to my boss. And so I presented it to her, and she loved it. Like she added her twist to it that made it even better, and we were able to develop it into something that was really quite amazing. And one of my favorite things that we've done here at eLearning Brothers in my time here. And had I not had the courage to say, well, I have this idea, and and put that forward, it never would have happened. We would have done something different that might have been just as good or might have not been. But that willingness to put out that crazy idea helped us develop better training. And so when you're looking at your jobs, I know sometimes, especially if you're doing compliance training, things like that, there are certain things you need to do. But look for ways to do it in more creative ways, and be willing to submit those ideas for consideration. So that way, you give somebody else the chance to tell you no, but you're not telling yourself no because you're trying to develop new and better skills. And so to just leave you with one last little bit of encouragement. So this whole process for me from joining AmpGuard I've only been doing it for about 9 months. Joining this organization was a big step outside my comfort zone. I'm not one that particularly likes meeting new people. I'm not one that's super comfortable with maybe sometimes making a fool out of myself in public, but I've gotten over that in the last 9 months because we meet every week in a public park. And so people come up to us, they see us, sometimes we get heckled, sometimes we don't. But it's really put me outside of my comfort zone and helped me expand my comfort zone and expand what I'm willing to do and continuing to progress and things like that. So as we develop new training and look for better ideas to develop new trainings, keep in mind that a comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there. And so in order to move past that, we need to continue to have better ideas, have more things that stretch us, and be able to move past our comfort zone to expand it, and then expand it again and again and again, so that we can develop better trainings and hopefully help other people to be better employees and better learners in the process. So that's all I have for you today. I hope that you're able to get something out of that. Before we go, though, are there any questions that people have?
Yeah, there's a couple questions coming in here. There's a couple comments, people saying, well, now I want to join a group.
You should.
You
and
can and
I'm
should.
happy to provide resources if you want to put that in the chat. I will reach out to you individually, but I'm happy to provide resources to help you find that. So.
There's a question here, if you have a crazy idea that's very different from what you're doing, how do you get that across to your manager or client? Do you use a storyboard or a rough concept? Do you take the time to build out a prototype with your authoring tool or something else? Ideas there?
So what I'll generally do is I'll go more the prototype route. Maybe not in the authoring tool, because I actually don't spend a lot of time currently in an authoring tool. I mainly do storyboards and things, but I'll build out something in the storyboard to show what the interaction is supposed to do, and then I'll go and explain it to them and walk them through what I'm wanting it to do, and showing them. And sometimes I get we don't really want to do that, or that's not possible. I'll go and consult our developers too to make sure something is possible as well. And just kind of go that route, so where I can show them something visually and then be able to explain what it's supposed to do.
One comment here is maybe try showing up to work in costume, and then you'll be ready to sell your point.
Yeah, that could work too. You never know.
Yeah, no other questions here. A couple comments. Pretty inspiring to see how you draw so much from your adventures, so that's very, very great.
Thank you.
The question that always comes up, what's your favorite authoring tool? I think Josh doesn't work in your typical authoring tools as a learning designer, but go ahead.
Not currently. I don't know if I can answer that. The only one that I've actually been experimenting with lately is actually one called Domino Flow. And so if you haven't heard of that, it's a truly responsive authoring tool.
We're actually going to have a webinar with Domino.
Are we? Okay.
in the second week of July, I believe. So
Yeah.
you guys can be looking for that.
And
if you
so
want to see
it's
that
been
one.
it's been an interesting process to learn that, because you have to learn to think differently with that too, because it's not like a slide-based one like your captivates and your storylines. It's more akin to, say, like a Squarespace or a Weebly, like some sort of like web builder, but it allows you to kind of develop once, and then it will respond pretty well. And we found it kind of fun to play with. Like everything, there's advantages to it and there's disadvantages, but it's been a fantastic experience so far to learn that. So.
Excellent. So yeah, we'll if you guys want to know, there's a couple more questions popping up about Domino Flow. We'll discuss that when we bring them in. We'd like them to have an opportunity to say they know way more about their product than we do.
They really do.
We'll bring them in the second week of July. We'll be happy to take more questions on Domino that way. And then, what application is used to develop this presentation? This is PowerPoint?
This is all in PowerPoint. So the guy moving along the path, that's actually a morph transition with a couple of fades on the different icons.
Again, kudos to Stacy.
Actually, that one was all me.
Oh.
Yeah, me and Thomas.
The icons were designed by Stacy.
But yeah,
right?
Stacy designed all the icons for me and designed the background and everything. And so, yeah, it's a pretty cool presentation. It turned out really well. So.
Stepping out of a comfort zone is challenging. Any more advice on how to make it a smooth process from your experience? And then other follow-ups. Thanks, Josh, for being willing to share a part of yourself with us today. That may have been another comfort zone thing.
It definitely was. But as far as like getting outside your comfort zone and things, make yourself uncomfortable. It sounds like a weird piece of advice, but find ways to push yourself and make yourself uncomfortable. If you're feeling uncomfortable, you're actually doing something right. Versus if you're just saying, "Oh no, I'm just going to sit here and do this. I'm not going to continue to push forward." Being able to say, "Okay, this is going to be uncomfortable for a minute, but think about what you'll get out of that experience." It's going to be something that's going to be valuable, and sometimes you will fall flat on your face, figuratively speaking. Hopefully not literally. But again, allow someone else to tell you no, and don't tell yourself no. Because to me, that's, in my life, that's been my professionally, LARP-wise, personally, telling myself no has been the worst thing for my progression. And it's the worst thing that you can do to yourself to progress. But just keep on pushing yourself and widening that net, so that way your comfort zone gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, like I mentioned earlier. Like, you just need to be able to just push yourself and move past it. And maybe start small, too. Maybe it's just, okay, I'm uncomfortable, I need to take next Friday off, but I'm uncomfortable asking my boss over an email, or how do I write this email better so that I get it across as to why I need to take this time off, whatnot. Something as simple as that. Maybe start there and then continue to move forward.
One other thought here. This person says, finally, I've got a way to incorporate my tabletop experience. Josh has done another webinar that, much like this one, focused around D&D. You should for sure watch it. We'll find that and we'll share that in an email later today, so you guys can watch that as well. All right, you got any more slides for me, Josh?
I have one more.
Excellent. So as Josh mentioned, he is working heavily on our customizable courseware product, our pre-packaged and ready to go courses, not templates. I want to say templates, but courses. And you can grab those. You can also grab stuff for Lectora, Captivate, Storyline, PowerPoint, Camtasia. We've got a massive stock asset library that has audio, video, and images. We've got icons, thousands of icons. And if you're not already an eLearning Brothers subscriber, you can sign up for a free trial and get 10 free assets, and you can download those today if you want to. So you go to eLearningBrothers.com, top right-hand corner, there's a free trial button, or if you want to just give us a call, 801-796-2767, we can hook you up and get you downloading today. Thanks, everybody, for visiting us. Thanks Josh, for this great presentation, and we'll see you all next time.
See ya.